Yesterday we worked on the showcase. What we did exactly is we added some numbers in front of the to-do items. So when the user wants to show the to-do items in the command line, they now get that number in front of each to-do. So that makes the output more user-friendly. We implemented that by iterating over the to-dos using an enumerate function. And so we access the index and the item from the to-dos list. So enumerate makes it possible to extract these two figures from a list. And then we used an f string, which always starts with an f in front, followed by these double quotes. Inside you can enter normal characters such as a dash or other characters, but you can also enter variables and even expressions such as index plus 1. So that expression will be replaced by its value, and that variable also will be replaced by its value. So we end up with one single string constructed by these elements. And so we print that string then in the command line, and that makes the showcase more user-friendly. Yesterday we also added a complete case. This serves the users to mark a to-do as complete, as done. So for that we ask the user what is the number of the to-do they want to complete, and then we used a pop method, which is a list method. So pop points to to-dos and it removes the item with this index. So we get the number from here and we subtract 1 to make it an index, because list indexing starts from 0, and so we remove the to-do that has that index. And that's what we did yesterday. Lots of interesting stuff coming also today, so let me show you that to you in the next videos. See you there. I don't know if you have wondering about it, but we have a big issue with our program. The issue is that the user enters these to-do items, but then if you close the program, those data are lost. So if I run the program again and I say show, it shows nothing. And that is of course the expected behavior of the program, because we are trying to save the user data, the to-do items, in variables. The problem is that when the program ends its execution, variable values are discarded, because they are simply saved in temporary memory on your computer while the program is up and running. So we need to figure out a better solution, and the solution is to get the user input and store it via Python in an external file on disk. And that is what you're going to learn in this video. So you're going to learn how to store data in text files. Now, there are different solutions to store user data. So one is text files, which is what we're going to use in this lecture. Text files is suggested to be used because it's a simple solution and it works very well with simple data. So in our case, we simply have these sentences. Now, if you had more complex data, you might want to use CSV format, so CSV files, or JSON. And if you have even more complex data, where there's more user interaction with the data, then you might want to go with the ultimate solution, which is SQL databases. So we're going to cover all these technologies in the course. Now let's focus on text files. So first of all, I'll start by creating an empty text file. So to do that, you can right-click over your project directory here and go to new and go to file and give a name to the file such as todos.txt. So that is a text file. Make sure that the text file is created in the same directory with your main.py file. So these are in the same folder. Then go to main.py and let's implement the add case first. So currently we have an empty list in here, and then the user enters a to-do item and we append that to-do item to the list. So to-dos is updated at this point with the user to-do item. Now we will keep these two lines as they are, but then we want to store the list items in a text file. To do that, you first want to create a file variable. In this file variable, you want to store a file object. The file object is returned by the open function. So open produces this certain type of object, a file object, just like we have string objects, so that is a string object. That is a list object. We also have file objects. So these are designed to interact with files on disk, with that file. So to interact with that file, this method requires the path to that file, todos.txt. And then there's a second argument you want to specify, which is a string again. It could be W, it could be R. In this case, it's W. W means write and R means read. So if you want to write something in that file via Python, then you write W. If you want to read the content of that file, so if you want to print out the content in via Python in the command line here, you want to read that file, so you extract the text from that file, store it in a Python string and print it out. In this case, we want to write. So that will create a file object, and then in that file object we write lines. So write lines is a method available for file objects. And this write lines method gets as argument a list. So our list is todos, therefore the items of this list will be written in todos.txt. So let's try this. I'm going to run the script. Press add to indicate that you want to add an item. Clean. Add again. Throw. And then exit to exit the program. Press enter. And then we want to check todos.txt. If you don't see anything, try to right click here and go to reload from disk, and that will refresh the content of the todos.txt file in your PyCharm IDE. So these are the data we entered. Not quite as you were expecting probably, because you see that these are merged together. There's an easy solution for that though. You can simply add a \n character after this. So that part contains the user input. So clean, for example. So if you say clean plus that, what you get is, I can show you that in the console. So basically we're doing this clean plus \n. So that merges the two strings. But if you use print and you do again clean plus n and you press enter, then what you get is clean plus a break line. So n is a \n is actually a break line. We didn't see the break line here because if you just do clean plus \n, Python will print out a very raw representation of the string. So it does not recognize \n as an actual break line. But print is designed to convert that symbol, that is a special symbol, special string, it converts that to a break line. So let's go back to our script and yeah, run this again. Add, let's try prepare this time, and add again, shower, exit. Let's check to-dos. So prepare and shower. So now it is working well. These are each in one line, but there is a problem if you've noticed it. Where is clean and throw? So they have disappeared. Why is that? I'll explain that to you. What happens is that this line here, what it does is if it finds that file in the directory here, that method will override that file. So basically it creates a new file with that name, and then it writes the lists in that file. So if there were other items, other text in that file, it will be overwritten by these new items, in this case prepare and shower. So this is not the expected behavior we want for the program. We want to keep the existing to-do items and be able to add other items under those two. So for example, now we have these two. If the user enters code in the command line, code should be written in here. So let's go back and fix this. The way to fix this is to first get an item from the user and then create a list, a Python list, and this list is going to contain the existing items from the text file. So first of all, we need to delete that list. We don't need that list anymore. So what we want to do is we get the item from the user, and then we say file is equal to open todos.txt R this time. So we open the file in read mode. We want to read what is inside that todos.txt file. And we create a variable todos which is equal to file.readLines. So that is the equivalent of this, but to read. So it will read the content that is in the file, and it will create a list with that content. Each line will be an item of that list. So at this point we have a list with two items, and let me make a break line. Then we append the user's item in that list. So if the user enters clean, then the list at this point will be something like prepare, what else, shower, and clean, the item that the user just entered. So something like that. And then let me break this as well. And in this part, we create a new file. So we completely override the existing file. And in that new file, we write that list, which contains 3 items now. So let's try this. Add, play, add, fix, and exit. Press enter. go to todos.txt, and that's the output. So we had prepare and shower earlier, now we have play and fix. So that code makes sure that the user to-do items are stored in a text file. Before we close this video though, there's something we need to add. So once you open a file object here and you have finished working with that file object, then you need to close it. Things will work even without closing it, but sometimes different parts of the code can interact with each other in a way that they will change the content of your file if you have not closed it. So it's good that once you are done with the file, just close it, and the same goes for this other one here, close. So you open it here, you close it here, you open it here, finish what you do, you close it here. Now this is just a variable. Here you could also have another variable, whatever here, so that would work, file whatever dot close. So it doesn't matter that we happen to have the same variable names in here. And that's about it. As a summary, let me open the Python console and show you what we just did. So we used the open function, and this open function creates a file, whatever, for example, .txt, that is the path to of the file. With W, you create a new file. If the file is existing, it will be overwritten with an empty file. And then you can write lines to that file by providing a list of lines. Line 1, line 2. You execute that. Don't forget to close the file using the close method. And in your directory here, if you do a reload from disk, for example, you should see whatever .txt. So those are the lines. So again, you can override that file by opening it again, write lines, and if you want to have break lines between the lines, add backslash inside each string, so that's one string, that's the other string, backslash n, press enter, file.close, reload the file on PyCharm, and you should see this new output. It is also possible to write text in a file. So here the input, the argument is a list. How can you write a simple string? Well, that is also possible. Again, we use the open function, and let's say whatever 2.txt in write mode, so the code is the same, but then instead of write lines, you use write. And instead of passing a list, you pass simply text. Hey, this is just text here and there. You can provide backslash n characters here as well, and press enter, and file.close. It closes the file. This is the number of bytes written in that file, just for your information. File close and reload. Whatever 2.txt has this text now. So you can provide, here is the backslash, which creates a new line. So that is how you can write text. And about reading, the same goes for reading. So with open, whatever.txt in read mode, and file.read lines will return a list. So you see it's a list. File.close closes that file. Of course, you can also use file.read over whatever.txt or over whatever 2.txt, and what you're going to get is one single string. So you see the difference. This gives you a list, and the list has multiple string objects 1, 2, while file.read gives you one single string. You can also see \n here, \n in here. If you wanted to print out the \n's as break lines, you want to wrap this inside parentheses and say print. So the print function gets this as inputs. Now, this is something interesting what happened here. We didn't get any output. So perhaps you were expecting to see line 1, break line 2. That didn't happen. Even if you say file.read, again you get an empty string. That is because the read operation is exhausted. So let me explain that to you. What happened? So we open the file here in read mode, and then we read the content. Now there is a concept called the cursor. So when you just open the file, the cursor is at the very first position. But then when you apply the file.read method, the cursor goes and reads the text, and then it stays here. So after this method is executed, the cursor is here. Therefore, if you execute file read again, as we did in here, the cursor will try to read again whatever is on the right side and down. And there's nothing here, therefore we get empty output here, empty output in here. So that's something to keep in mind. So the workaround is, of course, to close the file and open the file again in read mode. File.read should give you those lines. So that's about this video. Being able to store data in text files and to read data from text files via Python is going to be very beneficial for many applications. I hope this was clear to you, and I'll talk to you later. Hey, previously we implemented the add case, adding to-do items in a text file. In this video we will implement the show case. This is something you can also do on your own, I believe, because it will be the same code, basically, that we wrote previously. With the difference that here all we have to do is read operations. So let's see how we approach this problem. What we have so far is we iterate over the to-dos list. However, this will not currently work, because if I run this program and I say immediately show, we're going to get an error. So in line 19 in here, it says that name error, name to-dos is not defined. So what happened is we run the program and the program asks us for input, show, edit, complete or exit, or add, and so we entered show, and then the program tried to match the show string. So this is not matched here because this is add, therefore this code was never executed. So the interpreter went to the next case, show. Show was the input we entered, therefore we get this code executed, and there's no variable declaration for to-dos here. Therefore we got this name error, to-dos is not defined. Therefore we need to define to-dos in here. To-dos is equal to what? Well, first creates a file, is equal to open to-dos.txt, the path to the file that has existing to-dos in read mode. And then to-dos is equal to file.readlines. And that's it. Don't forget to close the file, file.close. So once we get the items in a list, you can close the file because the items are now in that variable. So if you close the file, that will not affect the content that is already in that variable. So make a break line perhaps here and try out the code. Show, and here we go. Those are the items. We do see some break lines between these items because what happens is that the file has break lines, right? There is a \n here, there's another \n in here as well, and so on. So break lines. And this loop here, the print function, will actually create break lines for itself. So we end up with 2 break lines. That's why we have this extra break line in here. So what we need to do here is we need to edit the to-dos lists. We need to go to each of the items and remove a \n character from that. We can use list comprehensions to do this, but this is something we'll do in the next video tutorial. So for this lecture, this was enough information, and I'll talk to you in the next one. See you there. Programming realization of today. I want to talk about Python data types, such as lists and strings. So previously in the code, we had the list to-dos defined in here. So we manually typed in that list. We typed in the square brackets and so on, and then we added items to that list using the append method. But this is not the reality. In real life, you don't normally create lists inside your Python scripts. So normally, lists are created automatically from other external files, such as the text file. So our list, in our case, was created at this point in here. To-dos equal to file.readlines. So file.readlines returns a list, and that is the same data type as writing a list with square brackets in Python. So it is exactly the same data type. The same goes for other data types, for example strings. Sometimes you do write things in your script, such as this message here. So you type in the double quotes, you write in the text, and so on. But most of the times you will probably get text from external text files, from databases. So for example, again in our case, the text this time is part of that list, so it's a list of strings that we get in here. So just to make sure you understand what I'm saying, I will execute that line in the Python console. So create a file object and then create a list. So to-dos is just a list, just like we get type. For that manually typed list, we get type list. The type of to-dos here is also a list. It is exactly the same object. And these are also strings. So if you want to check the type of to-dos with index 0, you can do that and you get a string, because to-dos with index 0 gives you a string. So prepare. So this is what I wanted to point out in this realization video about data types in Python and how they interact with your program. So these are structures that Python has made available to handle data. I hope this makes sense, and I'll talk to you later. See you. Hey, welcome to the code experiment video for today. Today we were able to read the contents of a file using the open function and the readlines method as well. And Python is able to find the file using this file name, todos.txt. So we simply give the name of the file here. And that is the case when the file is located in the project root directory. So the root directory is app1 and to-dos is under that directory. But if to-dos was in another folder, for example, if I drag to-dos and drop it in another folder, let's create a folder first. Let's name it files. So files now is inside app1 and to-dos.txt will be dragged and dropped inside files. Now, when I press refactor here, you'll see that the path here of this file will be changed by PyCharm automatically. So take a look here how it will change when I press refactor. You see, it changed from to-dos.txt to files/to-dos.txt. So all the files, the file paths changed to that. So that was done automatically by PyCharm. If PyCharm didn't do that, we would have to write this manually. So files/to-dos.txt, because otherwise, if this was just to-dos.txt and this as well, and the other ones also, and we run the code and we try to add something, so case add now doesn't have the file slash part. So if I press add and I try to add a to-do such as buy fruits, we're going to get an error, and the error says file not found error, no such file or directory to-dos.txt. So because to-dos is in another folder, you have to give the relative path to that folder, and the relative path is files/to-dos. Again here, files/to-dos. So that is a relative path, and it is relative to the project root directory, which in my case is app1. App1 is located somewhere in my computer, maybe C/users ardit app1, etc. It doesn't matter. The absolute path here doesn't matter. All these files can be referenced using relative paths from within Python. So if we have, for example, another folder inside files, so let's create a new one, subfiles, and drag to-dos.txt to subfiles, press refactor, and PyCharm again will change the path to files, subfiles, to-dos.txt using slashes to separate directories from directories and directories from files. It could also happen that you may need to point to a file which is outside of the project root directory. In that case, you'd have to use an absolute path, and I'll show you how to do that now. The only thing is that the process is different between Mac, Linux and Windows. So for that, I'll show you now my Windows computer on top and my Mac computer at the bottom half. The instructions for Mac will also be valid for Linux users. So the instructions for Windows, that's the Windows computer. And let's suppose that you had a file in your downloads folder. The file name is to-dos. It also has an extension .txt, but Windows doesn't show it. However, the actual file name is to-dos.txt. Now you want to click here and copy that path. That is the absolute path you need to provide now in Python. I don't want to pollute my app here, so I'll just open a Python console. So again, we would use open, the function open, and inside the quotes you'd paste that directory, and then you'd add another backslash, so not a slash on Windows but a backslash, todos.txt. And then you want to go to the beginning of a string outside the quotes and add R. I'm adding R here because we have backslashes on Windows, and that means some characters are special characters in Python. For example, backslash T creates a tab. If you remember, backslash N was also a special character. It created a break line. So when you say print backslash N, you get a break line. If you say print backslash T, you get a tab. For that reason, we want to change this to a row string by adding R just before the quotes. And that will treat every character as a normal character. It will ignore special characters. And then add the R argument and press enter. If you got an error, probably you may need to add another .txt here, because perhaps when you created the file you manually added a .txt, but then Windows adds another one on top of that, so you end up with this file name actually. So try to execute this and see if it works. You know it works when this doesn't give you any output, and you also know it works when you apply the read method and you get the content of that file, which is in my downloads folder. So that's the file. So that was how to read an absolute file on Windows. On Mac and Linux, let's suppose we have this file, todos.txt, which is in the downloads folder. So you may see it like that, but if you press this view option in here, you're gonna be able to trace where the directory comes from. So you get users AS and downloads todos.txt. So that means the path is file is open, the path is slash, we're using forward slashes here. On Windows you need to use backslashes, here you use forward normal slashes. Users AS and downloads slash todos.txt. Press enter, file.read gives me the content of that file. So you need to change this to your username, so you need to actually be able to get the actual path on your own computer. And that's how you read absolute paths on Windows and Mac or Linux. So Mac and Linux use forward slashes. So those were some code experiments on file paths. I hope you understand them better. As I mentioned, most of the time you're gonna have the files in your project directory, so you'll not have to bother with absolute paths, just relative paths. So thank you, see you later. Hey, welcome to today's bonus example. What you see on my screen are two lists. A list stored in the contents variable, and it has 3 items. It's too long, but we're gonna fix that. You'll see how. And then we have another list, file names. This also has 3 items. So these are supposed to be file paths. Each of them is a string. And those are supposed to be the content that will go to each of these files. So the first content, the second content, and the third content. So we're going to write a program, and when we execute that program, the program is going to generate these 3 files inside this files directory, and each of the files is going to contain the corresponding content. So the first file is going to contain that first content, the second file is going to contain that second content, and the third file is going to contain the third content. So let's see how we can create this program which generates these 3 files. Before we begin, I would want you to create a Python file and write this content. So 2 lists, 3 items each. You can write some dummy content, whatever you like, for these strings. And I would also want you to create a files directory under the main project directory and just leave it empty. The directory will be populated by Python with these 3 files. The Python file itself can be anywhere. It can be in the main directory, where main.py is, or it can be in another subdirectory, as in my case it is here under bonus 6. With that, let's begin coding. So how do we create multiple files? Well, when we say the word multiple, that means we need a for loop which iterates over content and over file names. So we're looking at 2 variables at the same time. We need to fetch this and that in the first iteration, then in the second iteration fetch that, so get that and this one. And to be able to do that, we use these 2 variables and we iterate over, well, should we use enumerate? It doesn't sound like the solution to me, because enumerate creates this kind of object, so a multiple tuples, like that. And each tuple has the index as the first item and the item itself as the second item. But this time we're not interested about indices. We're interested on the items of that and that. And to do that we use zip, the zip function, which works basically like enumerate, and I'll demonstrate you how. So if we have lists A and list B, 10, 20, 30, then X is going to be zip A and B. So that's what we enter here as well, zip contents and file names. So not content and file name, but contents and file names, these 2 lists. Here as well we have these 2 lists. So if you print out zip, you get this representation of the object, but if you convert it into list, as we did with the enumerate object, then you get this representation, which is the same structure as the structure of the enumerate object. The difference is that the first items here are actual items of the first list, and the second items are the items of the second list. So then we can continue our for loop here. We create a file object in each iteration and use the open function. So the file path, now what is file path going to be? The file paths are in file names, so we're going to use file name. File name extracts doc.txt in the first iteration. But in my case, the files are going to be inside files. Therefore, I want to construct a string using an f string. So it's going to be files slash, and then file name is the variable. and then close the f string. So what we're doing here is, if file name is equal to doc.txt, then this is going to create the file path, files/doc.txt. So a file in this path is going to be created in write mode. So we want to create files. That means we want to say write here, not read. And then file.write. And here goes the content. So in the first iteration, content will be this first string. Let's try to run this. Run. We get an error initially, file not found, no such file or directory, files/doc.txt. How comes when files actually exist? Even if I delete these files, because of course we expect the program to create them, so if I run this again, we're gonna get the same error. So it's not related to the files being there already. The problem is that my bonus6.py file is inside this bonus directory. So bonus is here and files are there. So what we need to do is we first want to go one directory up using these two dots, that's the syntax, and then slash. So that means the Python file is inside bonus folder, so we go up one level, and at this point we are in the app1 directory, which is one level up bonus, and then we go to files. So at this point we can access files. If your script, if your bonus6.py file is in the root directory, then all you need to do is that. You don't need to write this part. So if I run this now, we're going to get the files generated successfully. doc.txt, presentation.txt, and report.txt. Now, I mentioned earlier that this list is too long. We can fix that by splitting these into multiple lines. All you have to do is go after the first comma and press enter. And then go to the second comma, press enter, and the list will be spread out in multiple lines. It's still a list, the object is exactly the same. So this is also part of the syntax, another way to create a list. If I run the program, it will run again, so we still have these files. These are always overwritten whenever we run the program, because the write method overwrites any existing files. So that's how you can create multiple lines of code for one single expression. So the expression in this case is this list construction. And you can also split a string if you want. So if the string was very long and maybe you want to split it here, you can just put your cursor there, press enter, and PyCharm will split it. If you are on another IDE, then maybe this will not work automatically. So perhaps you want to do this manually. So the way you split a string is you just close the first string where you want it, and then close the quote. So you open quotes here, you open quote there, and then in the next line, again, you open the quote and you close the quote. So all that is treated as one string, so it is one single string. Note that this will not work in the Python console. So if you want to have a string in multiple lines and you execute, that string is actually going to be executed. It is going to be stored in the Python current session. So this split only works when you are working on .py files. Now, if the string was not in a list, it would have to be splitted differently. So let's suppose that A is one single string. I'm a string on my own. So when strings are individual, you can still press enter there and split it. But Python PyCharm actually will add this backslash, and that means this is still one string. So if the string is outside of a list, a backslash is used additionally. Both parts of the string are still enclosed in quotes, but there is a backslash in the first line. And if you want to keep splitting, you want to add another backslash and the other part of the string there, and so on. So this is the case when you have very long strings that go beyond the horizontal space of your editor. And it becomes useful to split them like that, so the code remains easier to see, to read and manage. And that's about this example. Thanks a lot for following. Hey, in today's programming tool, I want to talk about community forums, Python community forums. These are forums which I do suggest you to visit regularly so that you can keep touch with Python by communicating with other people, asking questions, opinions, ideas, and also getting news about Python and interesting stuff. So, the first one I would suggest you is a Reddit sub. It's one of the Reddit forums and it's about Python. So you can go to reddit.com and then in the search box you can search for Python. So that is the subreddit. It's called a subreddit. So this forum is exclusively for Python news or different questions regarding new features of Python, motivations, publishing source code from people. For example, this person here is publishing some codes on their GitHub to send emails. So you can click there and it will take you to the actual post. You can click on that link to see the actual source code for this post by this user. That's the username. So you can create your own user in here and post your own threads. So this is different from Stack Overflow because on Stack Overflow, which I covered yesterday, Stack Overflow is more about technical questions. So you get an error, you create a very specific technical question regarding the error. You cannot ask for opinions on Stack Overflow. For example, if you want to ask whether you want to become a web developer or a data scientist using Python, that is not a question for Stack Overflow. It will get deleted. So that is a question for communities such as this one here, or the other community, which is again on Reddit. So go to reddit.com and search Learn Python this time. So Learn Python is different from Python. If you can see the description here on top, this is more about news. So it's news about Python and posts which people want others to see. So posts about source code or teaching something about Python. So if you have questions about Python, how to use something, how to create, how to code something, then you want to use Learn Python. So for example, this other question, PyCharm or Visual Studio Code, this is also not a question for Stack Overflow because it is asking for an opinion, and Stack Overflow doesn't accept questions which ask for opinions. So on Stack Overflow the answer is 1, and it's well defined. In here people can give opinions, so you see this has 108 comments, this particular question. So if you have doubts about Python, just use Reddit. Another tool I would like to suggest you to use is Discord. So Discord is an app which you can download, and it is based on chat room, so you can chat with others in real time. And in this lecture resources, so please go to the resources, and there you will find a link which will take you to the chat room of this particular course. So there you will meet all the students of our course, of my course, which you're taking now, and you can discuss with them, you can ask technical questions, you can ask for opinions, career advice, anything. So please feel free to become a member and talk about fellow students about anything Python. So with that, I would like to close this video. Really consider visiting these forums regularly because they will keep you in touch with Python. So thanks a lot, and I'll talk to you later.